Welcome back, everyone, to Red Spotlight Entertainment. I'm Alexis, and I'm joined, as always, by David Francisco. David, how are you this week?
I'm good.
Doing good? Did you see anything this past weekend? Did you go to the movies? Did you see anything at home?
Did I watch anything? No, I don't think so. I've been watching this one show, the Resident. It's like one of those hospital shows. I like those. I prefer those than like detective ones. So, but yeah,
Wow.
I like it.
I've been watching The Last Airbender, the Avatar animated series, to be clear about that, and
Yeah.
it's incredible.
Hmm.
I just finished rewatching the episode that delves into the history of how the 100-Year War started with Roku and Sozin, and how that ties in with Zuko and Aang so perfectly and seamlessly, and just got chills watching that whole episode. It is such an amazing rewatch of a show, honestly.
And it's always a surprise every time I see that. I'm like, that's right, he's in the show.
I forgot. No, I literally was like, at the end when Ira was like, because Roku was your great grandfather, and I'm like, shut up. It's like I never watched a show ever in my life. I'm like, oh wow, that did happen, and I forgot.
No, I was like about who plays the Fire Lord. Who played?
I'm not.
He played Hellboy.
Oh, that was Ron Perlman.
Ron Perlman, yeah, he's always.
That was Ron Perlman.
It's always a surprise every single time I watch it. I'm like, Ron Perlman is in this show, man. Like, what the hell?
I did not know that.
Yeah, I mean, he's done others like Slade from Teen Titans. I don't know if you've seen that.
Okay. No, of course I know that. And now that you said it, I'm like, of course that was Ron Perlman.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's always.
I did not know that.
Mm-hmm.
I did not know that at all. So that's where I'm at right now. In the next week or so, I should be done with book 3. But it has been an amazing rewatch, and honestly, it's just been a nice detox after watching that horrible live-action version. And then I also just made me feel even sadder for it, because watching book 2 and book 3 made me like, you guys have no chance. You got no chance at even trying to recapture some of this stuff. Just visually, it's just not going to work at all. But it's kind of a perfect show, literally. And so after I finish this rewatch, I'm going to jump onto Korra, because I had not seen Korra also in 4 years. So, and it's just a seamless transition from one show to the other. So that's what I'm currently watching right now. Before we get any further, hi, everybody. This is, of course, the show called Red Spotlight, where we talk about movies every single week here. We don't necessarily have anything big. We don't have a big item to talk about today. It's just going to be a random list of things that have been on our mind, and that's going to be it. It's going to be a smaller show this week than it usually is. And we might be able to tease a couple of things in this very show, so stay tuned on Red Spotlight number 479. So that's where we are today. But yeah, I'm currently watching that. I also found something really interesting just by accident, I think, yesterday. I don't even think it was something that the algorithm threw at me, because I had not been watching anything related to this topic in quite some time. But I guess because it's kind of sort of been in the news in a way. Of course, I'm referring to that show you see behind me, that beautiful poster right there on Shield. And I'm not referring to the thing that people are saying. I'm referring to something I personally discovered on YouTube that I want to take the time right now and plug, because I think what I have seen thus far is easily the most comprehensive breakdown of not just the show itself, but the history of what it was like to watch that show and all the ongoings that were happening behind the scenes. And I had been literally wanting one of these YouTube video essayists, to go in and do this really long form breakdown of the show. And the person who I'm referring to is called Emily Bree. I'm sorry, Emily B. That's her name, Emily B. And she's pretty much using the same style that Quentin Reviews uses for his shows, his essays. which I have gone at length on this show, how much I adore, especially he delved into, since 2020, he's been delving into iCarly, Victoria, Sam and Cat, and literally some of those videos, just one of those videos is like 8 hours long. Most are at least 4 hours long, or even longer than that. Like they're really comprehensive breakdowns of not just the show. Because how can you fill 8 hours talking about Victorious? He did, and it's not just like talking about episode per episode, but just capturing the culture around the show and really kind of like you know showing how much it was hitting in the culture.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I think this person, Emma, also kind of said it herself in the video that I had not finished watching yet. But she said it that she basically is using his whole style as an inspiration. And I'll tell you, because here's the thing. It's multiple parts. And 10 days ago, she uploaded the first part. This is what it's called. The show Marvel Forgot, the messy history of Marvel's Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. What a perfect title.
Mm-hmm.
And I love how she frames it very clearly. I think she and I are on the same wavelength, not just in like the complete adoration for the show, but then also in discussing the history, because it is a really interesting history, because the title does say it all, right? It's like the show that Marvel forgot. And it kind of reminds you how all in Kevin Feige and the Marvel Studios team were in this show when they were like trying to hype it up before it even aired. Mm-hmm. And, writing on this Coulson Lives movement, and how that birthed the show and all this stuff. And then I think she says in her opening, like a few minutes, and then where we are right now, what happened? It basically was completely abandoned. So it is both a video on the history of S.H.I.E.L.D., but then also literally going by like the major storylines of the episodes. So now this is long form, which is what I've been wanting for. So the first part, I'm only an hour and 21 minutes into it. So it's a 3 hour and 20-minute video, just the first part. And the first part deals with seasons 1 and 2. That's it.
Dang.
So we've got more to go, and I'm eating it up.
Mm-hmm.
I love it. And I feel like this is easily like I know others have said similar things about it in obviously very easily digestible snippets, but I think this is kind of giving the show its due. And literally all her points are just like, yeah, exactly. I'm gonna share it with you. I don't know if you'll see it, but I think it'll catch your interest, especially how she's and the thing is, she very clearly is new to this. So far it only has like 7.4K views. She's new to this whole YouTube thing, and you can tell she's very young, but she's got something. Like she's engaging with how she talks about this. So it's like it more than holds your attention.
That's cool.
But what I thought was interesting is that this comes out at the same time. There's been some I guess I'm not sure if rumblings are the right way to characterize this, but for years and years and years now, there's always been like rumors or like, oh, what's going on here? And like maybe it's and before we get ahead of ourselves, because we are I guess guilty of that ourselves from years past, there is nothing in the works. Literally, a producer at Marvel TV was asked, do you think it's possible you guys will ever do a S.H.I.E.L.D. revival? And he's like, I suppose so. That's nothing.
Yeah.
That is absolutely crap. Like the idea that people are like latching on to this, and it's like, did you hear that this Marvel TV producer was like saying that they might do a revival of yeah, they might. They're not.
Yeah.
And they have clearly by the tone of that answer, there are no plans to do that right now. Also, if you ask me, clearly as the biggest fan of the show on this podcast, do I want Marvel to fuck with that? Because here's the thing. there is a long and storied history, and I'm gonna let Emma go watch her video, and she will break it down for you of Marvel Studios, kind of being wishy-washy about like how they treat the show. I would say for as much groaning as there has been these last literally 10 years now of how little recognition the studio has given the show and its characters and its fans really overall. Personally, looking back on the show and also recognizing how my tastes have like kind of grown throughout these last 10 years. And David, this is actually an interesting conversation to talk about because I actually want to get your thoughts on this. And I'm sure we've kind of circled this before. 4 years ago, damn, when we were talking about the final episodes of the show when they were airing in the summer, you and I did like a recap series of every single one of those 13 episodes. And I'm sure, those were long conversations, by the way. So we had a lot of like, plus it was COVID, so we had plenty of time to kill, honestly, when it came to that. But my view is it kind of was for the better of the show that Marvel Studios really wasn't involved overall, because all of the major story ideas came from the producers Jeff Loeb, Jeffrey Bell, and the showrunners Jed Whedon and Marissa Tangerowen. They're the brainchild. Even Joss Whedon, he was only involved for like the pilot. He directed the pilot. He kind of like he's a co-creator. That's why you see his name on every episode. But it's not really a Whedon show. Not a Joss Whedon show. Mm-hmm. It's a Jed and Marissa Tangerowen show. And I kind of feel like if Marvel Studios was like really, really involved, it really wouldn't be the same, because it would be a Kevin Feige production, and S.H.I.E.L.D. wasn't. It was a Tangerowen Whedon production, and they put literally, what did I say in the elemental reaction, which by the way is also on YouTube just now for those that want to see it. I said that some of the most interesting and best stories that we get out there are when the creators or the creatives are allowed to infuse themselves into the DNA of what they're doing, and it works off better. I don't know if people realize this, but the story of Fitz and Simmons is the story of Jed Whedon and Marissa Tangerowen. They based those characters off of themselves. That is their love story. That's why you have Fitzsimmons and their whole thing being such an integral part of the show. So, and also their sense of humor, I don't know how to qualify or how to categorize their sense of humor, but throughout the show, there's just like gags in there that kill me. Like in season 1, when Coulson tells Skye through the intercom, get ready for a large file transfer. And she's like, okay, how big? Well, she's like queuing up her laptop. Then it cuts to them literally May throwing a file cabinet out the window, and it lands in front of the truck. That literally a large file transfer. That's the kind of stuff that kills me. And so that's not necessarily Marvel Studios humor. Like their kind of humor is more just like, isn't this kind of ridiculous, guys? Isn't it kind of a joke that we're here and we're doing this stuff? Wink, wink, wink. Mm-hmm. By the way, do you know who is here? S.H.I.E.L.D. in some ways maybe tried to do some of that stuff when it, I think, was appropriate, but it also did take itself seriously when it needed to. And it was wholesome, and it had heart, and it also, surprisingly, even though people would never give it this much credit, but and you could say that, yeah, sure, everybody is a TV actor. Tell me those actors aren't working their damn ass off to deliver and make that material work. Very early on in the 5th episode, I believe. Remember that episode when Gemma like threw herself off an airplane because she had a contagion that would literally spread. She sacrificed herself, and then Ward flew out of the plane to catch her before she fell to give her the antidote. You don't seem to recall.
No, I remember the jumping out of the plane part. Yeah,
okay.
I could remember like the lead up to that though. I was like,
right.
With Germ, I can't remember, but yeah, I remember the jump.
No, it was the Shatari helmet that was making a whole bunch of those firefighters that were on the scene of the Battle of New York. Yeah, I lost you. Just go back and watch the episode. It's the 5th episode. But even early on in the show, you were like, why am I getting this emotional over these characters? So my overall question to you was, in trying to think back at the show, I'm not saying it wouldn't have been cool to have more tie-ins, especially at a time when you and I were really invested in the MCU. And also, come on, like we wouldn't have been like losing our minds for whatever tie-in there would be. But overall, knowing what you know now and how lucky Feige was that last decade and how clearly the Emperor has no clothes, with these last few projects, my view, I think it was for the better that despite the fact that it turned so many people off and despite the fact that many didn't ever come back, it kind of worked in its favor that it ended up, repelling so many people because it kind of, the executives, Marvel, everybody kind of just backed off and let them do their own thing. And when they were allowed to be their own thing, I think that's when you and I really began to fall in love with the show. And that's when it got better and better and better. Just to talk about this, and well, I'm going to say more things about this because it's also been circling around, but just your thoughts on this.
Mm-hmm. No, yeah, I mean, I think the 4th season is when they really started to go off on their own, for sure. And I mean, yeah, I think for sure it was for the better because they weren't going to communicate with them at all. So it was just it was best for them to just kind of do their own thing. And I did like the.
I want to correct something, David. There was communication. The only communication there was when representatives from Marvel Studios told them, and when I mean them, I mean Jeff Loeb, Whedon, Tantor Rowan. They were informed of things they could not do. That was the only communication that there was. I forget who it was, but I know that they were going to introduce. There were certain characters that they were going to introduce that they weren't allowed to. Oh yeah, in the first episode of season 5, or at some point, they were going to allude to Sword, and they were told you can't do that. So to be fair, there was communication, but it was just like, oh yeah, that's cool and all, but you can't do that. So, and they also were like, oh, you can't do the snap because the movies are not going to air in time, and that's a big spoiler. So there was communication there, to be clear, but I think what you meant was that there wasn't no crossover happening ever.
Yeah, basically.
Go ahead.
And I did like the moments though where they did when they could use something. I like that they took advantage of it. Biggest thing was in the final season with the quantum realm, how they used that to get back into their own timeline. Like that's great.
And don't forget, there was gonna be more. They cut it for time when Jed Whedon said that Fitz specifically mentioned the snap. Like there was an actual, like, I'm not even sure they filmed it in the long version of the finale, because I think the long version, if the episodes that we get are like an hour long made for TV, I think there were like 10 or 15 minutes more in the extended version, the original cut of it. And Fitz mentioned that the snap happened. So we would have gotten that more of a tie-in. So, but every now and then that they would do some things, like in the end of season 5 when that Cassius guy was like saying, even now as we speak, Thanos has declared war on your planet, when he was talking to Graviton. So every now and then they would do and come on, they're crumbs, but we love those crumbs, didn't we?
Yeah, I mean, at the time for sure. That's very specific. Like at the time, it was fun. Those little crumbs, for sure. Now, I mean, I almost wish there was less of them. Who knows what they could have done without those. So,
yeah. So why are we talking about this? Well, because it seems like people, for whatever reason, don't want to let this show go away. And people are always talking about this show. And I think just for starters, I think that's a very positive thing. That we're going on almost 4 years after the show ended. and people are still even people are finding it now for the first time. I know right now, I'm always on the lookout for new creators online who are doing something new with this stuff. I think I mentioned months ago that Jamie Durack and her boyfriend are doing this. They're committing to a 7-year podcast where they're actually reacting to the show, but well, they're not reacting like they're filming their reactions. They're watching the show and they're doing reviews on it for every episode, but they're doing it on the 10th anniversary that every episode aired. So they're not going to be done with the show until 2020. Until 2030, when the final season has its 10th anniversary. So that's commitment. That's it's kind of a bit long for my taste. So I catch it, I binge a few at a time. But like right now, they're currently in the episode where they're getting close to the episode where Hydra is revealed. So they're on that point. I know, right? But on the other side of the spectrum, I also am watching. I'm on the lookout for reaction channels, right? And currently, one of the reaction channels that I'm watching that's doing this show is called. Okay, I don't know how he means for this to be said out loud. One Media. It's spelled OMN1 Media. And he's been doing reactions since last fall, and he's currently on the 9th episode of season 2. This is the episode before Daisy's transformation into an Inhuman. So that's where he is right now. And I love the insight that because he does a bunch of reactions to TV shows, and I love that also I'm no longer alone, because all of these people are like saying, what the fuck was with people? This show was good from the beginning. Did it get better? A lot better? Yeah, it did. But like, why are people saying that? Oh, that it starts off slow, that this is bad. I'm digging this. Was it perfect? By no means. No show is. And look, there were a lot of growing pains in that first season. Sure. Mm-hmm. We've talked about this for many, many years. But ultimately, what do I credit most for me staying on the show long term? Those first 10 episodes. Those first 10 episodes got me to care about who I was spending the show with, which is something most streaming shows today cannot do because they're so focused with them trying to fast forward. Like 10 episodes was 10 hours versus most streaming shows, particularly on Disney Plus. 6 episodes is like 3 hours?
Yeah.
Because they're not even hours. They're like half-hour long episodes. So it's
for sure.
It's nothing. Absolutely nothing in comparison. So what helps and has always helped S.H.I.E.L.D. is that it's an actual TV show. And if it were made today, it wouldn't be anywhere near the same. Be nowhere near the same. Mm-hmm. Now, some would say it would be a lot better.
No.
I don't know from what standpoint you'd think it would be a lot better, unless you mean maybe budget. Mm. Now, granted, S.H.I.E.L.D. had a broadcast television budget. Were there moments where it looked rough? Yeah. But were there also moments where it looked pretty good for what they had? Yes. If you go back and look at what Mark Kolpak, the VFX director on the show, did in 7 seasons, it's a hell of a lot more impressive than a lot of MCU movies have been looking like lately.
Mm-hmm. But also,
that's the truth.
If it was made today with the 8 episode run,
tops,
the ensemble cast wouldn't have been the same for sure.
No,
they would have cut some people out for sure. So I mean, look at Stranger Things. I mean, that one has a big cast, but like not everyone gets the spotlight in every season. Like they really have to cut it down. Or I mean, it's also like rough watching like them trying to figure out a way to get some characters to have some character arc or a moment, and they're nice and all, but like there's no big impact, unless you have 20 episode season or something. Then you have plenty of time.
Because S.H.I.E.L.D. was an ensemble. Mm-hmm. And I think originally you had the original 7 main characters, but as the show aged, it added a lot of characters. And they needed their own space, but they
Mm-hmm.
had the space to do that because for 5 of the 7 seasons, you had 22 episodes. And by the time you got to the end, when you only had like 13-episode seasons, well, that was the end. You knew who
Yeah.
these were already, so you could play with 13 episodes just fine. The problem with what a lot of the shows have today is they can't get any runway because they're literally tripping over themselves to do a movie version of a TV season. Basically, they're trying to just like skip to the end, but like, well, who said this lately? Someone had a, oh yeah, Emma in her video said this. Like, there was this whole section of like filler, and her feelings were like what your and my feelings were, which is like filler isn't bad, and filler isn't what people think it is.
Mm-hmm.
People think filler is like, oh, this is a waste of time. They're just doing nothing, and it's not advancing the plot. Only people who are so slavishly devoted and committed to what the plot is and consider that the most important thing would view things that way. But if you're a more, I'm just going to say it, enlightened individual, you are aware that the actual essential stuff that makes a show work is the character stuff. And when does the character stuff happen? When the filler happens. When the filler happens, which is like they get the time to stop and breathe and live, and they get to know themselves better as characters, and we as the audience get to know them better as characters, right? That's how these things work. But the idea that so many people in fandom like look at that stuff and think of it's as filler, and when they mean filler, they mean skippable. And it's like, case in point, if you were to skip the first 15 episodes of Shield, which I'm sure some people have done, right? Because a common thing, a common selling point of this show is, oh, just skip the first 15, start off with the Hydra episode, and you're good to go. And maybe for some people they did that and they enjoyed it just fine. But you're kind of missing a lot if you do that. Especially, why would you even care about the real big twist of the episode? It's not that Hydra's there. It's the fact that one of their own was Hydra.
Mm-hmm.
That Ward was Hydra the whole time. And you feel the betrayal if you know him and you know what they meant to each other with the first 15 episodes. That doesn't work if you just jump in there like, who is this guy? Well, I guess it's a traitor. Anyway, let's move on. So, even though it only was 10 years ago, the way that S.H.I.E.L.D. was made kind of represents a bygone era of television. And frankly, a better era of television. When television was allowed to be television, allowed to be made like television. We have great shows, I'm sure, today. For example, Invincible or Percy Jackson. However, don't tell me those shows wouldn't benefit if they actually were on every year on appointment television instead of having to wait years in between seasons, which is hurting them both. Invincible, poor little Invincible, it made a big splash back when it debuted in 2020, I believe, or 2020 or 2021. I don't know when it was, but also that was a long time ago. We're now in 2024, and they're barely in the halfway of season 2. They should be in season 4 by now.
Yeah.
That's fucking crazy.
Mm-hmm. For sure.
That's why this shit's not working. One of the few shows that it hasn't actually worked against, because for some reason they actually aired every year on the spot where the Bad Batch, for example. Bad Batch has been appointment television because it always airs at the same time of year every year. This is his 3rd and final season, but for 3 years in a row, it made the deadline. So, like, at least once a year, it would come on. It's possible to do it, but for whatever reason, that isn't a lot of these streamers, these studios, when they went into doing television shows, quote unquote, on their streaming services, for whatever reason, it didn't occur to them to bring over their TV talent and let them, at the very least, sit in and give pointers, because they were the experts. They knew how to make TV. These streaming people were movie people. They had no idea how to make TV. Look at what happened last year when Marvel Studios was like forced to admit that Yeah, maybe we should have done a pilot and test it out first just to see how things went before we committed a whole over 100, $200 million budget to film it and then realize, oops, it's bad. We got to spend 200 more to refilm it. Or even the idea that, yeah, maybe we should have had like a list of rules for what our show would be.
Mm-hmm.
This is the kind of joke we're dealing with.
I mean, just time and time again, we just keep going back to regular cable television to be watched. You know, like I said, I'm watching The Resident. That's a regular cable television show, and I'm liking it. I'm spending most of my time with that. You're watching Last Airbender and all that. I mean, I did my reactions on Percy Jackson and everything, and I love the show. But from I mentioned this too in the first episode. The guy who plays Percy and the girl who plays Annabeth, they were the same height in the first episodes. By the end, he was like a foot taller than her. It's like that's a major difference. And then when the beginning of filming the show, he had like a very high voice, and then you see him by the time the last episode aired and he was doing all those press stuff, voice got so much deeper. And like it's finally settled. You can literally hear his voice crack during past interviews and all that, and then it's finally settled.
Well, look at what's happening right now with the live action Airbender. How much is Aang, the actor that played Aang, going to age before they even get to film season 2?
Yeah, I mean they already announced season 2 and 3. I don't know.
They announced it, but it's not filmed.
Yeah,
and if it's not filmed, it's going to take at least 2 years to get, which is fine. I don't care to see it anytime soon. But just to prove our point, it's a long time.
Mm-hmm.
It's a long fucking time.
Yeah, and for certain shows you can take advantage of that. Fine. Like I saw Lost in Space. That one had like a 3-season. That was a 3-season show on Netflix. It's actually really, really good. I highly recommend it. But the second season was supposed to start like right after the end of the first season, but the youngest kid hit puberty and he got taller and everything. So they were like, okay, no, we can't do that. We got to do a time skip. And I mean, it worked to their advantage because I liked like knowing what's happened between the first and second season and all that. Like it was really interesting. And so, I mean, there's some shows that it can work for, but Last Airbender, Percy Jackson, no. Because those are literally supposed to take place like right after each other, and yeah,
that's why you also, when you look at the streaming ratings by Nielsen or other people that do that stuff, why isn't it the top things that people are watching are old shows? Because they were made for viewing like this. They were actual TV shows that you can rewatch over and over again. Mm-hmm. Why do you think no one's rewatching Falcon and Winter Soldier or WandaVision or Moon Knight or Miss Marvel or Echo? Why is no one rewatching those shows? Because they weren't made to be rewatched. They were made like Marvel movies, which is you watch it once and you never watch it again. You never think about it again.
Yeah. I mean, even like those shows aren't that good, but like even the good ones, like on Netflix, The Crown, I haven't rewatched that. I haven't. The only time I actually rewatched Lost in Space was when the new season came out, because I just want to be like, okay, let me catch up with like what I missed so far and everything. And I do enjoy. Only if I really like the show would I do that. But ever since the last season aired, I haven't rewatched it. I mean, who knows if I even rewatch Percy Jackson after that show ends? Even. I mean, maybe. I don't know, because I love the story so much. But, I mean, yeah, like, what would I say? The Crown, Stranger Things, that one I don't rewatch, even after a new season comes out.
I only rewatch it when a new season comes on.
See?
Or if the mood strikes me, but not usually, no. When I watch a show, it's like, well, I pick an old one because it has an ending, and then I can just move on and not be left hanging, basically, you know? So...
I mean, one great show I haven't rewatched, which I really should, Arcane.
Where is that season 2?
It should come
out
this
that
year,
season?
I think, but it's been so long since the first one, which I'll probably watch.
You said Arcane, and I'm like, oh, that's right, that exists too.
Yeah.
This is why we don't spend that much time talking about TV on this show, because of like vexing realities like these. At least with movies, you watch it, that's it. You don't have to. You're not left hanging nearly as much as you are with TV. And you're also not nearly as frustrated with movies as we are with TV. But this whole thing, bringing it back to Shield, what I noticed is that there more and more people are finding it, and guess what's happening, David? They're liking it. They're liking the show. But wait a minute, I thought this was like bad. That's what the internet told me. That this was like not very good. Oh. I also love that Emma said it flat out in her video that people had like unrealistically high expectations of what the show was going to be. And then Jeff Loeb even said it, and then Joss Whedon even said it at one point early on. It's like, I don't understand where people got the idea. I think the marketing got people confused. But basically, this show exists because Joss Whedon was interested in the idea of the human element of the Marvel Universe, about normal agents that didn't have any superpowers. Now, of course, throughout the course of the show, some of the team did have superpowers, but it wasn't everybody. But some of them did get superpowers. But initially, this show was birthed out of the idea of like, what would it be like to live in this universe, but you're just being a normal person? And I guess normal comparative to what we see on the big screen, well, these secret agents. And Jeff Loeb was basically saying like, yeah, that's kind of what our show was supposed to be, but that's not what people were expecting. I guess people were expecting just cameos to happen every week. They were expecting actual Avengers to show up. And when you mix that with what people got, I'm not even sure if it was ever going to work out that well, considering with what people were expecting. And then comes the idea that at one point in the video, and I wasn't even aware of this, but Jeff Loeb had gone to one of his higher ups, and then that higher up went to the ABC TV executives and basically said, after weeks and weeks of the show's ratings hemorrhaging, you start at 12 million and then it went like this, like boom, like it was falling off a cliff, the ratings, very fast in the first 10 episodes. At some point, the guy went up to ABC and was like, look, if we're going to die, can we at least die on our own terms? And at that point, the executive stopped giving notes. And the team was able to do the show how they wanted to do it for the first time, really. Because when you go back and look at season 1, there are a couple of weird, awkward things that happen. Whether it be with filming or with writing or with certain choices that were made, you're like, that's interesting. That didn't work. But also, when you see what the show became, it was like, they wouldn't have made that choice. Then you begin to realize, oh yeah, they were getting a lot of not interference, but they were getting the executives themselves were very involved with the show at first. But you know what they also had working against them was that the MCU was going to blow up this organization. And there was this interview that took place, not interview, but it was revealed that Kevin Feige had gone up to Whedon and Tancha Rowan and Bell and Loeb and said to them, you guys know we're blowing up this show, right? You guys know that you're agents of nothing, right? What I love so much about what the writers did there was they used that agents of nothing. That's something that Kevin Feige actually said to them. They used that in the show. When Coulson, this is the episode after S.H.I.E.L.D. blows up and they have to they're searching for a secret hideout that apparently Coulson thinks that Fury is like calling him. This is where they go to the snow area, and there's like a hidden bunker in there. And Coulson kind of breaks down, kind of saying like, we're not agents of nothing. We are agents of Shield. And I love that looking back on it right now, how that was kind of a subtle fuck you to Kevin Feige. We're not agents of nothing. We're agents of Shield, and that carries weight. After everything we've been through, that carries weight. But as we said, also Kevin Feige never really. I don't know if he didn't never liked the show. It's not really clear, but I think it's clear that at no point did he ever care to involve it in anything. And to date, it's just not involved in anything. So I guess I can understand why some people are running with the headline that a TV executive today said, well, you never know. There's a possibility we could do a revival or a sequel series to S.H.I.E.L.D. In a vacuum, I suppose that's true. But is anybody really expecting that? Why would you? Also, here's the bigger question. I've always said for these last few years, the only reason I would want that to happen was for the careers of those stars involved in the show to kind of blow up and get more recognition. I would love for Chloe Bennett to be involved just for her to get more attention, because I think she's a really incredible actress and she doesn't get enough credit. Like her work on the show doesn't get enough credit. But like, imagine her today as Quake. Like that would get a lot of traction, and people love that character anyways. So I'm not opposed to that, but them bringing back the show and bringing back these characters, I'm not down with that, because I don't think they would involve you know who, and if they wouldn't involve Weed and Tangerowan, do I care? No, I'm not interested. It's like saying, like, do you want Spider-Man 4 without Sam Raimi? No. Do I want Hellboy 3 without Del Toro? No. It's like you get back the people who made it work in the first place, or you don't bring it back at all. Oops, they kind of already did that, didn't they, with Daredevil? I suppose we know how that's going to turn out, even though we already know how it's going to turn out. We already know how it's been turning out. It's been a fucking disaster every step of the way. And as we speak, they have no idea how many episodes they're going to make, but they're filming. They're filming. Do you want these people to bring back this show the way that it is right now? I don't want S.H.I.E.L.D. to be brought back only for it to end up being this because let me tell you something. If S.H.I.E.L.D. were to be brought back and not involve the creatives, and it was under Kevin Feige's leadership, you know how it would work out? It would be the same as what the current live-action Airbender did. Or it would be the same as what Ahsoka ended up doing to the animated shows. Like, you're bringing something back that had potential to be brought back, but you fucked it up big time.
Mm-hmm.
So no thanks. Like, I don't need this necessarily back. Not if it's going to be with you guys. ABC, on the other hand, if you want to explore that opportunity and bring back you know who, then we can get talking. And I say this as somebody who's like, there is, I think, real potential in the idea of a sequel series. Like, but you don't have to involve the same people. You can just get new team members. Like there's potential in that idea of the new generation of maybe not S.H.I.E.L.D. team, but like a sword team. There's potential in that idea. But that's not something that they're prioritizing. And then also now with Bob Iger stepping in and like saying, you fucked up too many times with your money. I think the studio the other day basically said, we're not making any more Ant-Man movies. We're not making any more Captain Marvel movies. Well, I mean, you shouldn't, based on how they performed, duh. But like still, like they're being, and then there've been conflicting reports as to what's going on with Eternals 2, if it's happening or isn't happening. I say, fuck them. I mean, we got Eternals 1. I liked it. Alexis liked it. Evidently, a lot of us did like it. We just are in a minority of it. Isn't that the story of my life? But still, like, we got that at least. Let's just be happy with what we have. That's how I say. Not everything needs to have a return. And especially if it's going to be under these circumstances, like exactly, I didn't even bring up Chloe Zhao. Would I want to see Eternals 2 without her? No, just not interested.
Mm-hmm.
Go fuck yourself. Like that's just not what I want. So, yeah. I know we've been going on this particular thing for a long time, but I wanted to just, share that with you, that I haven't forgotten about this show. I never will forget about this show. I know it has been, there hasn't been much traction in it lately, but I also just wanted to like put it out there, like, hey, people are not forgetting about it, and it actually turns out that people are like discovering it um, for the first time. Um, and I also want to say this too. We're also living in a we're living in a particular moment where something has dramatically changed a little bit since the last time you and I spoke about this, which is the idea that the Marvel Studios team now officially recognizes the Netflix shows as quote unquote canon.
Mm.
While that same respect did not extend to obviously um, the show whose name shall not be mentioned, the show that Marvel forgot. So nothing's really changed, which is, oh, at every turn, they're just completely snubbing the show. So nothing really has changed there. It's been the same story that's been for a long, long time. Um, I mean, the word canon doesn't necessarily carry that much weight these days, does it? Especially when your canon is filled with probably over 50% of it being crap. Right? Like,
Yeah,
it
pretty much.
used to carry weight back in, like, if you go back like 7, 8 years ago, that meant a lot because you were hitting it out of the park with everything for the most part. Now the reverse has happened. You're basically missing on every single assignment.
Yeah.
So I don't know how much you want to, say that you care about that particular thing. So yeah, that's what I wanted to say about what I've been watching there and everything. Um, I also wanted to use this time to talk about some of our plans that we have in the future. You might not be aware of this, David. I don't know the audience is not, but had a rather lengthy and frustrating conversation yesterday with Peter. Alexis was actually in that call eating popcorn, but for her own amusement, basically. Um, and we're trying to like pin down when exactly we want to do our top 10 movies of 2023. It's not good news. It's really not with what I would want. The gist of it is based on these being the final weeks of the program Peter is currently involved in. Um, he basically told me that he can't even start the process of watching whatever movies he needed to see that he had left to see to make his list until June, which means this show isn't happening until either June or July. Okay, so wanted to put that out there. So in lieu of that, because we're not about to just wait for that foolishness to happen. It'll happen, but we're not gonna wait forever and ever to do something. So in lieu of that, I came up with an even better idea. And in some ways, you could say that it kind of circumvents it. Whatever. I actually was like, well, here's my thinking is, we're in the year 24. We're basically halfway through the decade, right? Because the decade ends in 29, technically, not 30.
Mm.
So we're halfway through, which is fucking crazy. It's just like fucking crazy to think about. But we are halfway through. And I'm thinking, well, I have seen this idea thrown out there before, and I think we're in the clear. I think enough time has passed that we can do it. So earlier today, I messaged David. about an idea to do a top 10 show of our favorite 10 movies of the decade so far, which is very prone to change by the time we get to 2029, obviously. But I just thought it has been, honestly, these last 4 years, they've been really good. Like, they've been really, really good with movies. We've liked so many of them. So how cool would it be if we actually sat down and did a show where we talked about what were our favorite 10, not just of a single year, but our favorite 10 out of 4 years? Huh? That's something. And I think what also makes it a little bit more digestible is that, unlike the usual yearly lists, these will not be ranked.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that actually puts a lot less pressure on, because, and I'll be honest with you, the idea that I have my 10 already, and I was looking at them and I'm like, but how can I choose? I can't. How can I choose? That's the embarrassment of riches that we're dealing with here. So like, no, maybe you could say that we're taking the easy way out, whatever. But I just think it is easier for us to just pick 10 movies that we for sure already know that we love 4 years into the decade. Let's go ahead and do it. And since we're technically in the fifth year, we're in the beginning of the fifth year of this decade. I did say to everybody involved, Dune Part 2 does qualify.
Mm-hmm.
So if that's a film that is already one of your favorites of this decade, you don't got to wait a whole year to talk about that as being on a list. You can put it on right now. I know a lot of us have already seen it multiple times, so it's like, yeah, and I know some of us probably will. In fact, I know one of us already did, because earlier today I asked this question to Kyle Lira, and he just got back to me with a list.
Mm.
Should we read it? I think
Sure.
we should, right? Let's go ahead and talk it. Let's see what he came up with. I did glance at it. Some of it was surprising, only because I don't necessarily think the same way as some of these movies, but some of them I do totally get for sure. And of course, they were in no particular order. The one thing though is he did cheat. He didn't give me a list of 10. He gave me a list of 11, which is the same shit he pulled 4 years ago when we did the decade show, and he tried to pass off 3 films as his number one of a given year. Remember that? No, don't give me that look. Like, this happened when we did our top favorite movies of the decade. And I think it was the year 2017 and 2018. He literally couldn't pick, so he put 3 movies as his number one. So he does that. And then what he also does, he counts a trilogy as one movie. So what do you think he counted as one? Dune Part 1 and Dune Part 2.
That's funny.
So there were 11 movies, not 10 movies to be clear. So, but that's more than I think expected, honestly, to get out of him. So the movies that he picked were Dune Part 1 and Part 2, Everything Everywhere All at Once, Avatar: The Way of Water, The Batman, Jordan Peele's Nope, The Harder They Fall, No Time to Die, The Tragedy of Macbeth, Guillermo del Toro's Pinocchio, and Soul.
So really? Wow.
Interesting list of films. I appreciate the variety, because a lot of these, actually, all of these, except for maybe one of them, are not on my list. So now, does that mean saying that this is like, I don't like these movies? I fucking love Del Toro's Pinocchio.
Mm-hmm.
I think No Time to Die is great. Of course, I love Dune Part 1 and Part 2. Nope, amazing. The Batman, spectacular. The Way of Water, sensational. Everything Everywhere, perfect. These are great fucking movies. And I think this speaks to, really, why we should make this list, because these last 4 years have been amazing.
Mm-hmm.
They've been really, really good. And so I think you kind of get the idea. When we do the show, we're not going to just reveal it all at once. We'll go one at a time. We'll mirror it in a way how we did the top 10 show, where you go on, I go on. We'll go down our list, and again, they're not ranked; they're in any order. So we're not going to go off of. And now number 2 or 3. Now they're not ranked. I'm also especially excited because I also got confirmation that somebody is going to join us for the show who doesn't usually. No, we shouldn't even say usually. Who not one time has ever appeared on a top 10 show, except I think the only time she ever did was 2 different shows. When it came, well, that's not being fair to Alexis. That's what I mean. She has done podcasts where she ranked Disney princess movies. She ranked Pixar films, I believe, with Fantasy Fair podcast. Those shows are still up on our feed, by the way. If you want to listen to those, go and listen to those. They're really good podcasts. Also, during the pandemic, we did 2 different kinds of shows. We did a two-parter, which was the top 10 of the decade. She did participate in that one. And then also our 10, I think, or I'm not sure if it was limited to 10, but we had like films that shaped our childhood. That's also on the feed as well. So she has participated in these kind, but when it came to the yearly top 10, she's usually just overwhelmingly busy, and then also just like the idea of making a list makes her want to set herself on fire, so she doesn't actually do these lists. But I think it also helped her agree to do this, that she didn't have to rank them. I think the ranking part is the part that drives her crazy. So if that's the case, you don't got to do it. And I feel like it makes it easier. You like the idea? You already signed off on it. I just want to get. I want to hear from you. What about the idea that you like, and then also, if you already have a couple of ones that you're thinking of?
I haven't looked back on the past movies, so I really don't have anything. I mean, mentioned Batman, that would probably one, but I don't know. We'll see. If I had to choose between 10, I mean, that might be difficult. Who knows? But I mean, yeah, I like the idea of it too, because yeah, we're halfway to the decade. Why not look back on some of the movies that's come out since then, and it'll be fun. It'll be fun to go back to those, and who knows, maybe get more thoughts about them.
Especially because some of the films that I'm sure we'll be discussing, I know for me, I already have my 10, and I know some of them are like old at this point, considering like where we are right now. But it gives us a chance to talk about them again, which means it gives us an excuse to revisit them again and to see. I think ultimately what is the true point of doing it is to see what are the films that have stayed with us the most, right? It's not just enough for a movie, for you to watch a movie and enjoy it and like, that was great, good. That's not enough. I think the mark of you really liking a movie is if it stays with you and it refuses to leave you.
Mm-hmm.
And you can think of it on the spot and it all comes back to you. So I feel like the whole exercise of this is going to do a couple of things, at least the way that I envision it. It's going to remind us of why we love these movies in the first place. It's also going to remind us why we love film in the first place. And so I think whenever we can go out of our way to do more of that here on the channel, to be a celebration of film, which I think most of our content is. I know a lot, some of the stuff lately, well, not lately, I think perpetually throughout our entire existence, there's been a lot of content that has been overwhelmingly negative in nature, but that's not us coming from a place of wanting to ruin people's days, or that's not coming from a place where we want to destroy, something for the sake of it. All of the things that we've been very critical of throughout the entire 10 years that we've been on doing this podcast, whether it be the DC movies, the Sony movies, the bad Marvel movies, the bad Star Wars movies, the bad Disney movies, the shows, or even lately when it came to The Last Airbender or Ahsoka, or Little Mermaid. we were already in those fandoms. Like we didn't watch it to tear it down. We watched it wanting for it to be good, but it wasn't to us. And so, of course, we're going to kind of go over and over and over the things that we feel don't work about it. And I think more people should do that from a place of good faith, not from a place of bad faith, where a lot of people who are on YouTube or trying to make money off of this whole thing come from. And I think it's important to make that distinction because, yeah, for a long time, we kind of were pretty negative. I know that and I'll take responsibility for this. Back in 2018, when Kyle Lira asked me to take over the show because he wanted to focus his efforts on Fantasy Fair and other things, he told me that, well, one of the reasons why he didn't want to host the show anymore was because the news became so overwhelmingly negative. If you recall, at that point, that was the turning point when most of the stuff that was coming out was becoming very, very negative. When the podcast first started off back in 2015, 2016, most of the movie stuff was very positive news. It was nothing but excitement everywhere you looked. And then at some point, it flipped, and mostly it was like negative stories, like bad stories. And then as more and more of that happened, Peter and our commentary became very like bashing you over the head with just like, this is awful, this sucks, this is terrible. And I can totally understand Kyle's perspective where, you know what, being in the middle of all that can be a bit much. And so that in addition to also wanting to devote his entirety on Fantasy Fair, where he wanted to create a more positive environment on that podcast, he asked me to take over because at that point, the discussion was being dominated by me and Peter anyways. And he was like, well, you guys do what you want. Do it. I want to go do this over here. So when that happened, which was in August, September of 2018, recall what was happening in the news at the time. Rehire James Gunn, rehire James Gunn, rehire James Gunn. The movement to rehire James Gunn, and how every week there was like news in the development of what happened because he had just been recently fired during the San Diego Comic-Con weekend because Mike Cernovich, a Trump supporter, was mad that James Gunn was critical of Donald Trump on Twitter. And so he dug up some old tweets that he had already apologized for years ago, but somebody at Disney was a bit trigger happy, fired him, and then all of this, it spun out of control. What a time to be alive, by the way. But when that happened, understandably, a lot of us were pretty pissed.
Yeah.
I was very angry. If you go back and listen to those shows, very fucking angry. And most of the conversation was dominated by just getting in there and tearing into it. You could say that, because I was kind of given the reins to do that. Kyle allowed me to be that way. So I was taking advantage of it, but I also had my own growing pains too. My demeanor on the show has changed throughout the last 10 years because why would it not? So has David's. We grow as people as the years go on by. And as we hit every year or every couple of years, there is a change. Back in 2015, 16, even 17, most of our conversations were dominated by what was coming out of the world of Disney, Marvel, Star Wars, maybe even DC as well. It was mainly the fandom stuff that kept the podcast conversations going. But at some point around the time of 2018, 2019, there was a turn that was happening. I think us as film fans, we were also exploring different kinds of stories, and we were also kind of growing in our tastes were evolving into something else. Remember, 2018, that was the year of Annihilation, Hereditary, Bad Times at the El Royale, like these different kind of movies that kept coming along, and we're like, this is fucking great. I think Hereditary was, on average of our lists, the top movie that year from our group. And so at that point, while we were still into the big stuff that was around at the time, like the Avengers movies and Game of Thrones, it also was like the twilight of that, because the very next year, 2019, you had Endgame and you had the final Game of Thrones season, for better and for worse.
Mm.
But it kind of like closed out that era. And then the year after that, oh, and then let's not forget Rise of Skywalker. That also happened that same year as well. Then after that, immediately was COVID. And then we kind of had to like pause. And then when we started back up again, it turns out we were far more interested in different kinds of stories. And when the franchises were starting back up, they were just like considerably less appealing than they were before the fact. So throughout the course of this show, we have changed. And at least I would hope that people would have noticed that, especially these last couple of years, ever since 21, I want to say, these last 3 years, I'm not that angry that. Of course, I always am angry at something or someone, because I'm bitter, always will be, about something. But compared to how things were back in, years and years ago, it's been a considerable change. So we've had a long journey here on the show for sure. I know this is some stuff that we hadn't discussed in a while, David, but did some of this bring up some old memories? Just want to get your thoughts on what I was just speaking to, if you have any to share, whether you agree or disagree, or like how you personally feel. We have grown, and the show has grown throughout the years that we've been on. And I think, to be clear, you didn't start becoming a player on this podcast until 2017, I believe. But then also, that was a very different you than you are today.
Yeah. No, I mean, everything you brought up, the biggest thing that like brought flashbacks was the James Gunn firing thing. And I just remember all those videos, people being like, "What the fuck?" Yeah, that was fun. But no, I mean, everything from the past, though. I mean, for me, for sure. Yeah, you guys mention it all the time. I've just been. I know I'm always quiet in these episodes, but like, believe it or not, I was quieter when I first started off doing these podcasts and everything. And I mean, I would say, just the biggest thing I noticed more is just notice more on the filmmaking aspect of it. That's always what I try to focus on. I always try to bring up the cinematography, anything about lighting and all that I always try to bring up. That's only like, to me, that's really like the biggest thing that I can contribute on some of these conversations. Every time I bring up plot and all that, but for sure, I've just gotten better and better at the very least analyzing these movies on the spot and all that. So yeah, it's been cool.
I would say you're really underselling it, because think about it for a moment here. Just generally, I think it's fair to say that when you first started on this show, you didn't say much of anything, in large part because, first of all, you already liked the show itself, so you were just there to listen to it. You really weren't there to speak. And I think to an extent, that still kind of happens, where you just prefer to sit back and listen rather than, I think, share or engage. Not that you don't, you do, but you're more comfortable listening. That's your default. But at the same time, I'm not sure, and I think you've also spoke to this as well, you weren't necessarily all that comfortable in your ability to be able to communicate what it is that you were thinking. That kind of came later on. The way that you speak now is certainly not at all the way that you spoke back then. And to be fair, you didn't speak at all, which is how it was at that time and everything. But not only can you carry a whole conversation with a person, you can do it on your own now. The idea that where we are right now, last week I said you were the backbone of the podcast now, because you are, the whole quality of the output that goes through you. The main editor, and not just doing this show that we're on right now. We're doing several of them. We've got
Turn to page.
I was thinking of the other one, Turn to Page and Quest Center, right?
Yes.
You're hosting both of those shows. Like, here's the thing. Like, you don't need me or Kyle or Peter for you to do what it is you want. And like you even said like last week or 2 weeks ago that there were some moments in the conversation that it got quiet with you and Peter. I didn't hear that at all.
Oh, okay.
I listened back to the podcast, the second half of the podcast that I couldn't be there, but you and Peter had your own discussion on Dune Part 2. I listened to it. That was excellent. The way you carried on and were asking very important questions and adding in your thoughts, the flow of that discussion was as it should be. This is what I would expect when I listen to a podcast. I was even texting with Kyle over the weekend, going over all the stuff that's been going on, and he had mentioned again that he was blown away. I mean, he told you through the main chat, but just to reiterate what he said to me on a private message, like he literally was blown away with what you were able to do. Granted, of course, he hasn't necessarily been listening to the show in a while, so it may come more of a surprise to him.
Mm-hmm.
But he was very, very impressed with how you conducted yourself and how you were basically handling all these things. So, and it also hasn't gone unnoticed when Peter said, in his own way, he basically was complimenting you for the same thing, but he had his own Peter way of getting to that main point. So clearly the work that you've put in has been very much noticed. I mean, I caught the elemental reaction today. The editing was superb. Like it was great. I gotta like thank you so much, because what you did for like years and years, we finally were able to work in Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. clip in there somewhere.
Yeah, that was fun.
And I'm like, of course I was very, very taken with that. So, at the same time, as I've been saying, our journey on the show, movies, the different kinds of movies that we're into. And I think it's an important thing to remind ourselves of that. Like, I think a lot of the films that I like today, I don't think I would have cared for 10 years ago. But I couldn't have been, because who I am now is not who I was 10 years ago. And I think it's important to, like, the reflection of the movies that you like are a reflection of you. And also, when you've been doing it for as long as we have, those lists that you made 5, 6, 7 years ago become kind of a photograph of who you were at that time. Now, things are obviously very different. So what am I into these days? Well, I'll show you. I still collect physical media, as I think should everyone. But I recently got Wonka on Blu-ray.
Nice.
I also acquired Poor Things on Blu-ray as well. So these are very different kind of movies, if you can tell. But I know for a fact this one, I probably would have been one of those like normie assholes that were like, what the fuck was this movie about? Like, I don't get it at all. Why am I being shown this? This is a waste of time. I'm so glad I'm not that person, because I can't imagine watching this and like not having fun with it. Like it is an incredible movie. But you have to like, you got to vibe with it. That's the thing that watching a lot of movies these last few years has like taught me, is you got to understand that every movie is its own universe, and you can't think that they're all playing to you. They're all different stories, and they come from different people who have different tastes. So they're all going to have their own vibe. And you got to like try and vibe with it as much as you can. And it's not going to work all the time, especially with the movies that are bad. But I just think like what I've been saying on the show for weeks now and for years is that just try and push yourself out of your comfort zone and see like a bunch of new stories. Why not?
Mm-hmm.
Don't just like settle for whatever trash Netflix throws at you. Go beyond that. Which is to say, um, for example, if you are somebody out there that did not get a chance to watch Hayao Miyazaki's latest film, guess what? You're gonna have a chance because it's coming back to theaters. G Kids, the main distributor here domestically, is bringing it back in theaters this weekend, March 22nd, at the same time that Disney and Pixar's most Ghibli-like movie, Luca, makes its debut finally in theaters after 3 long years. God, has it been 3 years?
Mm.
Yeah. Damn. Well, it's going to be 3 years. In June, it'll be 3 years. That's kind of crazy. So, and in my view, I think Luca and Boy and the Heron make for a perfect double feature. They're beautifully animated movies. So go watch that if you have the chance to. Personally, I think that's a far more adventurous choice than Ghostbusters, whatever that Frozen Empire thing is called. And I'm not knocking it. I'm just saying, for me, um, I'd vibe more with those than that. But take chances. Watch the movies and look at these movies that Kyle put out there. I wouldn't have guessed some of these, and also these are, and again, Kyle also, and I spoke with him over the weekend. I know he hasn't been here in a while, and so like he also has grown. He also has different tastes as well. So like, and some of these, I'm like, they're not the Kyle I remember. Some of these very much are, but all of us have our own, I guess signs of growth for sure. Like I had no idea he liked Saul that much. That's an interesting choice.
Yeah, for sure.
Or Pinocchio, as a matter of fact.
Mm.
I know he really, really loves the tragedy of Macbeth. I fell asleep at that movie like so many times. I couldn't get through it, man. It's a hard watch for me. Harder They Fall's good, but I don't personally, it's not anywhere near. It doesn't register as a movie that I would say that I loved. So that's just me again. But there are a lot of movies that came out these last couple of years that I love. But they ain't gonna be on the list. Because guess what? I only can pick 10.
Mm.
So movies like Oppenheimer, movies like Dune or Avatar or what's it called? Dragon Ball Superhero. They're not gonna be on my list, but I love them.
Yeah,
I absolutely love those movies, and I think to me it just shows you what a great decade it's been so far for these kind of movies. So that was Kyle's list. So at the moment, because Peter Martinez is unavailable for the foreseeable future, the show that we're going to do is going to consist of you, me, and Alexis. And I can't wait to do that because that's going to be such a fun show.
Mm.
It's been a while since we've done a show like these, like this one for sure. I think you might even say it's been 4 years, almost 4 years since the last, because this kind of fits in with the stuff that we would do during the COVID time. So we gotta fix that. We gotta go out of our way to make more fun podcasts like these. At least, because I don't know what happens. We get so well. I know what happens. By the time we get to the fall, we get so bogged down with trying to. It's every time this happens. When we get to October, and from October all the way to March, it just becomes like a catch-up game of trying to see as many as the new releases as possible, especially because that's the fall festival season, that's the Oscar season, that's the award season. So, and then whatever big movies also that are like squished in there. So from October to March, it is just a marathon. And then when we hit April, as we're about to, from April to July, then that's the spring, but then also the beginning of the summer movie season. Really, I think to me the slow periods of the year are always July and August, and also September. This past September and August were pretty was nothing. So in the future, I mean, what and also we've been talking about some ideas as well for reaction commentaries. We might have that time, as a matter of fact, in July and August to film those then and there. We might be able to just shoot a couple of them out of the way, because that usually is the time when nothing comes out. And to be fair, January, February of this year, there was nothing. But there were so many movies that we hadn't seen from the previous year that's where most of my time personally went to. So that's where we are. Anyway, any last thoughts on this, David?
No, not on that.
We could also, on the flip side, I don't remember. I think when we did the top 10 of the decade, did we? And I know I'm asking you an impossible question that you don't know the answer to. I recognize that. I'm just putting it out there. Do you remember? I know you don't, but do you remember if we spent any time talking about what were the worst movies of that decade?
No, I don't think so.
That might be something to play with, although we'll see. I don't know if there have been that many stinkers these last 4 years. I mean, there have been stinkers, but like on the level of like BVS, Suicide Squad, Justice League, Rise of Skywalker, maybe Rebel Moon, Quantum Mania,
Flash.
The Flash. Forgot about that movie. That's right, The Flash. Black Widow. That's the thing. It's a stinker, but it's not of that level. Probably.
Yeah. It's like there's different levels to it for sure.
Yeah.
So that's kind of hard to decide. Because I was thinking of Indiana Jones, but I was like, nah, I wouldn't find it as like, I don't want to put it with Flash.
It's not. No, it's not on that level. Flash is like, yikes. Like Indiana Jones is more boring than it is yikes. That's a different situation. So yeah, we might be able to toy around with that, but we'll see. So we'll talk about Dune real quick, because something pretty magical is happening. I mean, us on the show have been pretty much wildly and madly in love with the Dune franchise lately. I know that you've seen it 3 times.
Yes.
Okay. I got a chance to see it a 4th time this past weekend in IMAX. Very nice.
Nice
presentation as well. It is a movie that keeps getting better and better and better with every watch. And I'm saying it right now. When it comes available on digital, we should probably make Dune Part 1 and Part 2 our next audio commentaries. And maybe we might be able to have Peter available for those. So that's something to think about when we get to that point. But it turns out we're not the only ones that have been taken with the movie. Because we saw in the first week that it opened to $82 million. And again, I want to stress, Dune is not one of these movies that has a giant $200 million plus budget, or that, needing to hit $1 billion is ever a necessity. It's just not that kind of franchise. It is a science fiction bona fide franchise, and by virtue of being that, it has a couple of built-in limitations due to it. As a matter of fact, if you remember, Dune Part 1 did get not necessarily a backlash or a blowback, but there were a number of people who saw it that weren't taken with it because it was very science fiction-y. It was just very heavy on the politics and the world and the window dressing and everything. So, but $82 million was already starting off at a better thing, because that opening is double what the first one did. That's a great place to start off with. But what was even more impressive was in the second week, the hold that it had was legendary. Just to keep people in perspective, blockbusters are very commonly dropping over 60% of its audience in week 2. And in some instances, that's a pretty good number. However, this movie, Dune Part 2, only dropped 44% in the second week. That is legendary. That doesn't ever happen. It dropped 44% to make 46 million in week 2. This past week was week 3. And it dropped by an even lower amount in the third week. It dropped 37% in its third week. These are incredible holds to make $29 million in its third week here domestically. This is an indication that people are not only liking the movie, but they're coming back to see it again. But word of mouth is spreading and new people are coming in to see it. And I also want to say there's something a bit of a spooky, I guess it's spooky how the numbers align, but it is an interesting parallel because Dune Part 2 in these first 3 weeks is performing identically to how Oppenheimer performed in its first 3 weeks. Let me give you the numbers as they are. Both Dune Part 2 and Oppenheimer in week 1 made $82 million. Both Dune Part 2 and Oppenheimer in week 2, both of them made $46 million. Both Oppenheimer and Dune Part 2 in week 3 made $29 million.
What the fuck?
The same numbers from where it starts to how it was like earning every week. I've never seen that. That is eerie. Like I don't know what's going on there, but that is just like what the fuck.
Yeah.
But that is a great comparison to be at because like Oppenheimer like almost made $1 billion, right? Like that was a very successful film. And at the same time, Dune Part 2 has crossed a major threshold. It has already made more than the first one did worldwide. As a matter of fact, in the last few days, Dune Part 2 has crossed over $500 million at the worldwide box office. That's $500 million. But here's what makes that figure even more impressive. The budget for Dune Part 2, and this is kind of impossible to believe. Have you seen this number?
The 500 million or the
500 is what it made. The budget for Dune Part 2, 190 million.
Yeah.
The way that it looks,
Mm-hmm.
you would think it cost a whole lot more to make that movie.
For sure.
So the budget, just the cost, I don't know how much they blew on marketing. That could be 100 million more. Who knows? But still, that is an example of what is supposed to happen with these kind of movies. You keep the budget manageable. That way, when it comes out, it's guaranteed to be profitable.
Mm-hmm.
This is not what happened. Now, granted, there's some exceptions, like with Indiana Jones and Mission Impossible. Those films ended up being outrageously expensive, in large part because they had to stop during COVID and then start back up after it. So that is understandable, but that was an astronomical number. I think Indiana Jones was like over 300 million. Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny was over $300 million. And from a visual aspect, it looks pretty bad. Dune Part 2 is one of the best looking movies ever made.
Mm-hmm.
Less than 200 million to make.
Just no excuse, Marvel.
Or anybody else, really, Disney.
Anybody else, yeah, but mainly Marvel.
But Marvel specifically, yeah.
Yeah.
It's mainly them. Like they just not realizing. I think it cost Marvel more money to make Secret Invasion than it cost Warner Brothers to make Dune Part 2.
Oh my god. The only reason why is because of those reshoots too.
Yeah.
that's that's just dumb. But also, this also adds to the fact of what I've been saying. It's like the whole weekend box office that no longer is proof that your movie is popular.
The first weekend. The first weekend, you mean?
First weekend box office, like that no longer means that you're popular or not. Like it just doesn't. People,
You gotta have legs.
You gotta have legs. You gotta have a reason for us to come back and watch it again. But also, you gotta rely on word of mouth. That first weekend, if reviews are bad, you're not gonna make money. But yeah, I mean, it's not a crazy coincidence that it made the same amount of money as Oppenheimer on those weekends, but also not at the same time because like they're both good movies. And again, just proves my point. Like you need time to make your money back for these movies, and it needs to be good. So,
and the word of mouth is especially key, and it's carrying those films to that success. I think you can also point to other movies that came out last year that had this similar effect. Remember how a lot of people were kind of like writing headlines that the sky was falling when Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 only opened to $115 million. But you know how much that movie made? Over $800 million. That alone should tell you, kind of boost your point, which is the opening weekends don't tell us a whole lot in the end how much a movie is going to make. The only thing they do tell us is if a movie is dead on arrival. Like Madam Web was dead on arrival. The Flash was dead on arrival. Speaking of that weekend, back to the Flash, I think it was June 15th, I want to say. Flash won the weekend at $55 million, but the film was such a colossal bomb, it cost Warner Brothers over $200 million in lost revenue. Another film that ended up being profitable in the end due to strong word of mouth and legs, but opened significantly lower, was Disney and Pixar's Elemental. Story. Oh, are we okay?
I think so.
That was weird. Oh my god.
It was weird because it wasn't just frozen. Like we just lost video over there. What the hell?
That was so strange. If you're watching the video podcast of this, it's just like it turned off and then turned back on. We were just like, what's going on here? That's strange. If you're listening on audio, you're like, what the fuck? What's going on? But when you look at the story of the Flash and Elemental, that's kind of the tortoise and the hare. That's the story there basically, because out of the gate the Flash had a big lead, but it just spluttered and then just spiraled almost on impact. Madam Web was dead before it even opened. Like everybody just knew. To me, I think it's funny because look, it's not like so many Marvel movies have not been successful. Venom was very successful, but I think it speaks to how bad of a trailer that Madam Web trailer was, that alone turned so many people off. And then the reviews came out, and then it just reaffirmed what people suspected in that trailer, and they didn't come out. So also you got to keep in mind, of course, that comic book movies are kind of coming out of fashion. Like it's not that they're like not popular anymore, but they're not as popular as they used to be.
Yeah.
And I think when you look at, I think Peter has been speaking to this as well. When you look at this decade so far in blockbusters, like the ones that Kyle mentioned, Dune Part 1 and 2, The Batman, Avatar: The Way of Water. I'll even throw in there Top Gun: Maverick. And I'm sure there's some more that you can throw in there. But we're seeing a return of the big Hollywood blockbuster in the way that we would get them back in the early 2000s, when they're actually made in a way where you can tell with a lot of craft and care, and they look amazing. and they're being fueled by these auteur-driven filmmakers for the most part. We're kind of getting back to that, and we're kind of moving away from, like, what I keep saying, the year of 2023 really opened a lot of eyes about like what people want, and also especially who they're tired of seeing on the screen. We shouldn't underestimate that. So using this to kind of pivot a little bit toward a similar topic item, how animation is doing. I know I plugged Boy and the Heron and Luca, but they're not going to make gangbusters. For one, their old movies are they're planning for re-releases. But what is making a lot of money right now is Kung Fu Panda 4. So here's the dichotomy that's going on here. Animated films in general used to make a lot of money at the box office, and they still do. But something has happened these last couple of years where the original animated works are just not keeping up in comparison to the sequels, which is why everyone is doubling down, namely Bob Iger, on producing more and more sequels. Kung Fu Panda 4 is a sequel, and it's making a lot of money. But it also just speaks to Disney not being able to keep up with literally any of its rival studios at this point. We're going to see Inside Out 2 and see how that performs very soon in June.
Did you see the trailer for that?
I did see, yeah.
I really liked it.
I did too. I'm not going to lie. I'm like, they've got something here.
Yeah.
But the idea of a sequel just needing to exist is just like.
Yeah, I know. Especially for me too. I would have much preferred if they just go with a different character and keep using the same emotions. I feel like you're just gonna start complicating things when you're adding all those new emotions on it. I mean, it makes sense in a way, like why these new emotions are coming in and all that. But again, I feel like you're just gonna make things complicated. Because now, like, the biggest question is, how come we don't see those emotions with the mom and dad? You remember?
Mm-hmm.
So it's like, where are they at? They got to explain that.
You know what I also didn't realize? Inside Out 2 is going to come out 9 years after Inside Out.
Oh
my God. It just now dawned on me.
That's a lot.
It's a lot of years.
Yeah, for sure.
This also might merit doing. I'm not gonna go there. But it's interesting. It might very well be good. And to be fair, Pixar has a much better track record at pulling out projects. Lightyear notwithstanding, Pixar has a much better track record of pulling together films than Disney Animation for whatever reason. Disney Animation has made some movies where like, what's going on? You were like really good for a couple of years, and now all of a sudden. But Pixar, on the other hand, I mean, while I recognize that there wasn't a need for all the sequels, the only sequels that ever really bothered me were Incredibles 2 and Lightyear. I didn't hate Cars 2 or Cars 3, but I also didn't need them. But and we all disagree on the Pixar sequels. I enjoyed Toy Story 4. I really liked MU and Finding Dory. Like, they were still good movies. So can this be good? Yeah, I never doubted that, but it just leaves a bad taste in your mouth because we know why it exists in the first place. And it's not stopping there. I'll tell you this, Inside Out 2 has a chance to be something good. Can you say the same about this supposed Moana 2 coming out later this year? Probably not. That's just not happening.
Yeah.
So, but on DreamWorks is also they're kind of going down this road as well. I think this week they announced that Shrek 5 is officially in development, as well as a Donkey spinoff. There's ideas for sure that could be interesting to play with. I would also think that if you're doing that, that would involve the return of Puss in Boots. I would think anyway. But DreamWorks has been doing well. It's been on the upswing. Other animation studios have themselves been on the upswing as well. In lieu of like the vacuum that Disney has created, basically, with them just kind of like crapping the bed and all this stuff. Um, and we're gonna have an interesting movie come up as well, by Alex Garland, the director of Men, Ex Machina, and Annihilation. His big budget A24 movie called Civil War, which stars Kirsten Dunst and what's his name? Who plays Ron Swanson? Nick
Mm.
Offerman, um, and others involved as well. That trailer got clowned on a lot months and months ago, and yet it just had its debut at South by Southwest Film Festival,
Mm.
and the reviews have been stunning.
That's interesting.
It's very interesting because the Civil War movie it's an interesting premise,
Mm-hmm.
and I never necessarily wrote it off, um, because I knew it was Alex Garland, and he is a great visionary. He should not be somebody to be dismissed or laughed at.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's going to be something that I'm looking forward to in the next few weeks. But something else that I think we should not dismiss, David Leitch is somebody who, kind of is a hit or miss for me. I didn't care so much for Bullet Train, but I really, really like Deadpool 2. So he is coming with a new rom comedy, with Emily Blunt and Ryan Gosling called Fall Guy. I just saw the trailer for that this past week in the theater,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm like,
yeah.
give me more of this. This is great. Emily Blunt and Ryan Gosling, by the way, also gave us a little taste of what their chemistry would look like as they presented it together at the Oscars. Which was funny because they were there to promote stunts, but it was just a commercial for Fall Guy.
Mm.
That's where we are. Fall Guy is something that I'm very much like up my alley. I'm looking forward to. You know what else? This is also the thing too. There's actually a couple of really good movies to look forward to. That Furiosa trailer.
I'm getting pretty excited about that. Honestly, the thing that gets me is the music of it.
Hold on a minute. I don't even mean the new one. I meant the old one. I had seen it before, but this is my first time seeing it in the theater because I saw it in the IMAX presentation.
Oh, okay.
It looked incredible. I haven't even seen the new one. How was the new one?
No, actually, I didn't see the new one. It was.
Oh,
I'm talking about the first one for sure. But like, even just that one got me excited about it, and like, I don't know why. It's something about the music like gets me pumped up for it.
Yeah. It just looks incredible too. Just the quality of the picture.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, whoa. Another one of these big auteur blockbusters.
Mm-hmm.
And then we'll see how it is received, but we're going to get a new Planet of the Apes movie. That's not nothing.
Yeah. I mean, that one's like, the trailers look great. Like, I have no complaints about it. But it just has a lot to live up to.
It's a wait and see.
Mm-hmm.
That one is more a wait and see because Matt Reeves isn't involved, which I didn't want to say it. That bitch just delayed the movie another year. The Batman 2 coming out in 26 now.
Great.
He needs to get a move on. This is ridiculous.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I don't know how long we can be expected to wait like this. So it's interesting, like all of a sudden, this is the season that's coming our way, the spring and the summer, and I'm excited. I didn't even mention Challengers. Zendaya, Mike Feist, and Josh O'Connor. That's coming out pretty soon as well. Go watch all of those movies, people. Please, go watch them. I think we have it in us to make it a really important box office year. And then I should also mention Deadpool and Wolverine.
Yeah.
Which I'm not crazy about the title. I would have preferred to have just been called Deadpool 3. But Deadpool and Wolverine, it is a buddy title, which is, I'm sure, what the movie is going for.
But also, Wolverine is definitely going to get people.
That's the thing, yeah. It's there for marketing purposes to get people in, get butts in seats, basically.
Mm-hmm.
Deadpool and Wolverine. And it is a good trailer, too. It's got potential for sure. We didn't discuss the trailer for Wicked on here. There's not much to go off of except
Yeah.
for the color didn't quite do it for me, especially because there were like side by side screen grabs of the trailer of Wicked and then also the Sam Raimi Oz the Great and Powerful movie. And it was like, again, what is going on with some of these movies? Just like, you know,
Just turn
removing the color.
just turn up the saturation. Like it's
Yeah,
fine.
like
Like I don't care. It's perfectly fine. Especially honestly, the only thing that stands out to me on that is you remember the first images that came out for that, and people were like, "I can't fucking see a thing." Like people were just like, "What is this? We can't see anything in this." And then finally, they like I don't know if they actually it was actually like a re-release of those pictures, but they were brighter now. Uh, but it was funny. That's that's the biggest standout for me on that movie.
I mean, that you could have fooled me. Were you talking about Wicked or were you talking about The Little Mermaid 2023?
Yeah, yeah,
Because it's the same bullshit.
yeah.
And usually when they do that, well, to be fair, some people you would refer to it as a stylistic choice. It's an ugly one, but usually they do that to cover up some not so great VFX if it's
Mm.
darker like that. Um, so yeah, that's where we are, and I've got nothing else to go off of. Would you like the opportunity to talk about something that you haven't had the chance to say on the show before we close today? Because I'm pretty much done.
Yeah, actually, I remember what else I watched. I couldn't
Oh
remember
yeah.
for some reason. Final season of The Blacklist. I don't know if you've ever seen that
Oh,
show. It finally ended. This is sadly
it
a sh-
barely ended.
yeah,
How long
uh,
was it on TV?
10 seasons. Yeah, Er, the past like 3 to 4 seasons, I was like, is this the last one? No, I don't think so. They're kind of ending it on a cliffhanger. This one though, yeah, this was for sure the final season because of that ending. But sadly, this is another show that I'm like should have ended it sooner.
It went off too long.
It went off too
Yeah.
long, especially when it lost a character. I won't say who, but it lost a character that I was like, I'm no longer invested in this. Like as much James Spader, he held that show. Okay, like I was in it every single week, or I binged it because of him because he every single time gives a fantastic performance and all that. But there was an important character in that show that when that person was gone, wasn't that invested. So that was one reason why it went on for too long for me at least. But overall, though, I think it was a fun show. I like the concept of it. Basically, James Spader, biggest criminal in the world, and he helps the FBI capture other criminals. One that we don't even know about. One that we will never even think about, like thinking of them as criminals and all that. So you get some interesting investigations and all that. But overall, I love the characters on that show. So if I think it's still worth the watch for the whole show. Um, good.
No, finish your point.
No, I was gonna mention something else, but go for
Go
it.
ahead. No, you go.
Another movie that I saw, but if you're gonna give thoughts on the show or
I was not. No, I'll go ahead and talk about your movie. I
okay,
just remembered something else I want to talk about, but I'll go after you.
okay. Another thing I saw was Damsel of the what's her name?
Is it
Stranger Things girl.
which one?
The main one, the one with the psychic powers.
Millie Bobby Brown.
Yeah, Millie Bobby Brown. Her. That's the one. It's been getting some bad reviews. I enjoyed it. It's just 100. What is it? Like an hour and a half movie, kind of action packed and all that. Very simple plot. Like it's nothing to rave about or anything like that. But I enjoyed it. I had fun with it, and Millie Bobby Brown was pretty fantastic in it. Um, but yeah, I thought it was a good, fun movie. Not much to say much. And then the other thing I saw, Kung Fu Panda 4.
Oh, you saw it.
Yeah, I did.
Oh, you did not say that.
Yeah, my bad. But I was gonna mention it later, so that's why. But yeah,
Well, I
I
guess
did.
later is now.
Yeah, I did watch it. Fun movie. Definitely recommend it for kids. I'm sure they're gonna love it. Kind of disappointed at it. I love the first three movies. Where they went with this, I think it could have been better. I didn't like So the idea of Poe having to find a successor, that's an okay idea. The thing though is none of the characters age, and so it just makes me go, why so soon? If they had done that, then I would have been like, okay, yeah, he needs a
It's
successor,
kind of
obviously.
giving Lightning McQueen in Cars 3.
The thing, yeah, I was thinking about that like throughout this podcast. Like, how come it worked for that one that I was okay with him passing the torch, but not okay with this one? And I mean, some part of it though is because they did show him to be old, like he wasn't actually as fast as he was before. But then also, I think it just had like a better build up where like he was getting better at his racing and all that. But I think seeing him enjoy more so of training her and like giving her the motivation to like follow her dream, I think maybe that's what got me more invested in that movie. Whereas this one though, it was, I mean, Poe did a good job of like getting his successor to like on the good side and all that, but I felt like that was kind of the obvious thing once, because like for Cars 3, it doesn't really click with you in the beginning that like, oh, of course she's gonna be his successor and all that. Like he's like she's doing all of this and all that, and when it finally came time for her moment, I think it was just more impactful. Whereas for Kung Fu Panda 4 on his successor, the moment where she had to like stand up for herself. I hate using this as like criticism, but it was predictable. You know,
Mm.
I always hate hearing that on people's criticisms of movies, like everything was predictable and all that. It's like, okay,
It didn't, you didn't feel it.
yeah, I just didn't feel it for sure, and yeah, I just didn't like where they went with Poe, because I feel like it really could have been more impactful. I don't know how to get to it without spoiling it, but like, yeah, just disappointed in how they treated the whole you need to find a successor, even though it didn't really feel like he needed someone like that. They could have done more things, either by look or just in the story, to really make it more impactful. That yeah, it was time for him to move on from the whole dragon war type of thing, and yeah, they were just doing some predictable stuff with them with the successor, where you knew where it was gonna lead to. So yeah, a little bit disappointed.
That's kind of the impression I've been getting from some people.
Hmm.
Not bad, but not that much to live up. It didn't live up to it.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting stuff there. That's also part of the reason why I'm not that like crazy to go see it, because I love the first three.
Yeah.
I don't necessarily need to go back and watch another chapter that's just like not doesn't compare.
Mm-hmm.
So there's that. What did come to mind, because we did talk about this a few weeks ago. Have you been keeping up with Bad Batch?
I think I might be missing an episode or two.
What's the last thing you saw?
Um, Crosshair and Nana Ricker
Hunter.
making up.
Okay. So what on the ice planet?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Okay. So you missed 2 episodes that happened. And what you basically missed was we finally get a glimpse at what Rex has been up to. So Rex has been kind of getting a whole bunch of clones out, and he has his own base of operations, and they've been kind of like trying to like find clues as to like where this Tannis base is,
Mm-hmm.
and break out the remainder of their clones. At the same time, what you also do see is more, maybe not more information, but you get to see more of those really like creepy sniper clones that don't have personality. The ones that we saw in the last season. Remember that one that they captured, but then he kind of like killed himself during the Senate episodes. So there's more of that at play, and then it also kind of alludes to that Crosshair knows a little bit more about that than he wants to let on. But then what I also have enjoyed about those episodes, and then also the one that you were speaking to, first of all, it's been a great season, and these episodes have been really, really good. But like, I think to me, the best thing this season has been doing, just reinforcing how great of a character Omega is. I love her. Her dynamic and newfound bond with Crosshair whoa, I'm really loving it. Like,
Mm-hmm.
and again, Crosshair was the one that was like, fuck you from the very beginning. And then kind of like fucked off and did his own thing. But in a way, you could say that Crosshair was always the best character on the show. And I think it kind of continues to be. I just love his whole demeanor and especially now the dynamic that he's bringing. And I think it was important to like, well, we can't just take you back. Like, there was a lot of love lost between
Mm-hmm.
us, basically. Um, there were chances for him to come back, but it took a long time, and so I think it was very. I like how they played it that Hunter and Wrecker were not immediately on board with the idea of Crosshair being back in the fold, even to the point of like Hunter saying at the beginning of the episode that maybe it was a mistake to let him have his weapon back so soon. When I think it was they were on Potifu and like he was like doing target practice with AZ3, I think, in the beginning of that episode. Your thoughts on how this season is playing out?
It's pretty good so far. You mentioned it, the relationship between Omega and Crosshair. Like, I am loving it. I just love that she's making him open up and all that, and she's the one like on his defense the entire time. And I really like that episode of the one in the ice planet because I mean, him picking up those helmets and setting up, I was like, oh my god, what the hell? Like that was, honestly kind of like emotional. But also yeah, and you mentioned too, I like that Hunter didn't give him. He wasn't like immediately on board with this whole situation and all that. And, like he wanted an explanation, like, how dare you, basically. So yeah, I think it's been really good, the whole dynamic between all of them. It's been fun.
Well, remember a few weeks ago. Well, you need to watch those two because there's a new one tonight, as a matter of fact. So you got to catch up on some of these. But remember how in the first episode there was a really long like camera focus on one of those clone troopers. Remember the theories. I think with what I saw, there is more evidence to suggest that whoever this clone is somebody who we've seen before. Only because they don't show you anything, but they're just spending so much time on this that it's like, it makes you think. So that's not saying that it's for sure tech. There's no way to know that. But I think more information on that is going to come out pretty soon.
Okay.
As we go on in the season, but like again, this continues to be a very enjoyable show, and if for no other reason, the animation, man, every episode looks top notch. So, yay for all of that. I'm not sure where this goes next, but we'll see. I still don't know how they're gonna end this thing.
Yeah,
I'll tell you that
for sure.
So I think with that we're about good to go. So that's where we're gonna stop today. Where we pick up next week, who knows? But enjoy your life, enjoy your time. Thank you, David, for being here. Thank you all for listening. Catch us under our spotlight next time for more content and more. And we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.
Bye.